Hi everyone, welcome back. Today I have a piece of content I'm excited for. If you have been following my channel for a bit, you'll know that last year Brian Coval and I had some Eternal Weekend testing that we did and recorded for the channel. We're doing something similar this year. Brian and I are both likely going to play Bug Beans. Right now I'm torn between Bug Beans and this blue-black deck that you see in front of you. And I was hoping to get some testing in to just see how that matchup plays out. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to have a few matches of Bug Beanstalk versus Blue Black Reanimator. His side of the video will be on his channel. My side will be on my channel, obviously. And we're just going to try and see how the games play out, see how the matchup feels from the Bug Beanstalk side. I've been having a good personal win rate with it in testing, but some of that was before Fnatic was printed. Some of that is for less experienced pilots. So we are really looking to drill down and see, okay, versus the best deck, what's likely to be the most popular deck at Eternal Weekend, how does Bug Beanstalk fare? And the list on my end, nothing too crazy is going on. We wanted to kind of pick a build of the deck that we think will be the most prevalent. Some lists play Wasteland and some lists do not. I think if I were to play the deck at Eternal Weekend, I am probably not going to play the Wastelands just because I think that casting Psychic Frog on turn 2 or going Entomb plus Reanimate on turn 2, like let's say you had to ponder off an Underground Sea on turn 1 to find, either half of that combo. It's just very important to do and is a big part of your win rate. Like I think you lose a lot of games when you don't get those starts because you drew a Wasteland. And so that's what I'd play, but I do think that the Wasteland build will be more popular. So we're going to alternate between having Wasteland and not having it in the list just to see if that comes up at all, if, having to play around Mana Denial makes the bug side worse or better, or etc. And then nothing too crazy in the sideboard. I've found that 3 pieces of Graveyard Hate is around where I want to be in the mirror match. I think that leaving in like all 4 Entombs and hoping to get there is probably not a good idea in the mirror. But some people are going to try it still. And so I think that if you have 3 pieces of Graveyard Hate, that plan kind of falls apart very easily. And then I'm choosing Murderous Cut as like my flexible removal spell of choice compared to like some of the 2-mana ones that people are talking about, like Go for the Throat and Shoot this Sheriff. I think Murderous Cut's like a good deal better just because sometimes you just need this to be 1 mana, if you're trying to double spell on like turn 3 or whatever. And then this comes up very rarely, but it is also sometimes a blowout in the mirror match where it's like, let's say your opponent goes to reanimate a creature out of your graveyard because like there's nothing in their graveyard. You can cast Murderous Cut and delve away that creature and then kill their creature, and so you fizzle the reanimate spell and got a removal spell in. So I think the first reason, the tempo reason, is the more important and more relevant one. But the second half of that does come up too. So that's all that's in the list. Again, nothing too crazy, nothing too out of place. I do think that No Rod will be a very good sideboard card for Eternal Weekend just because it's good against the Prison decks and the Mystic Forge combo decks and Painter as well. So just a lot of the Ancient Tomb decks. This is a good sideboard card to have. Yeah, let's jump in. All right, here we are for round 1. I am on the draw. Shoot in with the Wasteland build of the deck. This is a hand I would always keep in the dark, and it's also one I'm going to keep here. Does have Ponder, Brainstorm to find the combo. Obviously, Daze is a good piece of free interaction early on. I feel like I'm never truly blind. So we're talking about if we want to pretend like we know the matchup or if we want to play it blind. But I feel like playing like we know just lets us see how the decks function a little bit better. It's also hard to be like truly unbiased when you actually know what your opponent's on. The biggest thing that comes up is if you play out Nile Spellbomb on turn 1 in the dark, and that's already something I've been doing, like even when I don't know the matchup, just because versus the decks that it's good against, it's really, really good to get that going. Where it's like, good. where like the decks where it's good against, it's quite good, and then the decks that it's not good against, it doesn't matter as much, and you want to cycle it anyway, so it's just like fine to play it out on turn 1. So the issue here is if I have to daze something, this Fanatic gets kind of bad, but I guess I have the Brainstorm still. It is just a 4/4 at this point. I think I can do a little better than this. Okay. Going to shuffle. If I had like a Troll of Cause and Doom, I'd feel much better about that decision. But I just feel like I'm likely gonna have to daze on turn 2 against this deck. Well, I can't daze that. Well, I could, but I'm not going to. It's annoying versus like specifically Psychic Frog, I guess. I could Fatal Push this. Oh, that's the downside of fetching the island, huh? Is that I can't Fatal Push and reanimate it. Do I want a second daze? I don't think so. I'm gonna do this and then either Fatal Push the Strix at the end of the turn or Surveil. Obviously, this is a deck that plays Wasteland, so fetching the base 6 is relevant. But I do kind of feel like I think if I had been able to test the Spell Bomb without them getting to draw a card, it would have been ideal. But I guess I could probably do that on a future turn. 2 Spell Bombs. All right. This is rapidly deteriorating. All right, I'm gonna Surveil. I guess I'll do that. I'm gonna play out Psychic Frog, and then I'll Ponder. Because Ponder, if it gets dazed, I don't mind as much. Whereas the Frog, I would prefer to not get. Okay, Fanatic is solid. Where it's like if this Frog gets Fatal Pushed, then Fanatic is like a way to test the Spell Bomb, but also like, you know, the Spell Bomb draws a card, but I get my 4/4, so it's like we both got 2-for-1s, so we both break even. Quick maths. That is fine. I mean, it's not. It's good. Here, I feel like my opponent probably takes the Brainstorm here because it's like Daze is pretty easy to play around when you know it. And also it's like you might want to be holding up black mana anyway. I also just have like dead cards that it would be nice to shuffle away, you know. So I think Brainstorm's the pick here, but of course I don't know the cards in my opponent's hand, and that is one of the downsides. Like you see, my opponent is down to 3 cards in hand. That is one of the downsides of the Spell Bombs, where it's like it is good, but it also means that you're working with like less quote unquote resources. So my opponent is saying they're okay if this gets dazed, but I actually want this in the graveyard for the Fanatic anyway, so this actually works out reasonably well for me. It's a miracle. Yes, I'm going to cast this for its miracle cost. I assume the Spell Bomb gets popped, but I am not sure. Because my opponent knows they don't have like Entomb or anything. No tricky business here. So I assume one of the Spell Bombs gets popped. That's fine. And I think I'm just gonna go ahead and Fatal Push plus try to reanimate the Strix. The Bug Beanstalk deck does not really play any bounce effects, so I don't have to worry about this getting back into my opponent's hand somehow. And so yeah, so this actually ends up being a reasonable sequence for me, where it's like if this Spell Bomb trades with this reanimate, that's a 1-for-1, and it doesn't draw a card. I'll daze back, obviously. I would like to reset my Surveil land. So it's like if this trades 1-for-1, it's quite good. And then basically the first now Spell Bomb traded with half of a card. Like it traded with the card Fanatic was bringing back, but not the Fanatic itself, so I'm actually ahead in that exchange. But yeah, at this point, my whole hand is known other than this brainstorm, which is quite a good draw. Now, the thing is, my opponent is at 15 life. I do have a board, but obviously my reanimation effects are still not looking good. Opponent could just play something like a Murktide Regent and stabilize the board very well. That is one of the things that it's like Fnatic was a good card against fair decks like Bug Beanstalk, but it, Murktide does still line up very good against it, very well against it, I should say. And if the Murktide is drawing you a card off Beanstalk, then you also just don't have to worry. Okay, so that's a card I probably want on Surveillance of the Graveyard. With the Surveillant. Oh no, okay. Alright, so I guess we go like this. I'm at 6. I have 6 lands. I guess 6 is the magic number where you can start casting trolls and fanatics, so this is rough. This is definitely one of the downsides of the blue-black deck. I've talked about, not in public, but just with my friends and talking about Magic. I talked about how this deck, it feels like it lacks velocity sometimes, where sometimes you just don't do anything, Like, the cards in my hand are not good. I've flooded, I've drawn fatties. If I were to have drawn a Reanimate, it would have been blanked by the Spellbomb. Unsurprisingly, the Spellbomb gets cycled here. This is a good play, I believe. If I had drawn an Entomb here, if this land was an Entomb, like, you could say, oh, I flooded, but like, even if this land was an Entomb, it would not be good here. So yeah, there's a lot of fluff in the deck where it's like if your big over the top thing gets stopped by your opponent, sometimes you can kind of sputter a bit. Obviously, I have a board right now, and my opponent does not. But I was gonna say like a Murktide Regent could change that. Obviously, Psychic Frog resolves. So I'm just going to attack with the Fanatic because right now, the Frog cannot kill it in combat. And I'm gonna leave the Baleful Strix back to, force that. They have to deal with Baleful Strix first before they can attack. Which, I mean, the deck has a lot of removal, so it's not unlikely for that to happen. But if I don't attack with a Fanatic, they can just jump it. Yeah, unsurprising. So it's like they have to attack because they could just jump the Frog here. And I can't even draw Entomb because it tracks us in hand. This has just not been a good run out. Which is fine. Like I said, like the deck does sputter sometimes when your opponent is able to stop. The opponent is putting Shield's Edict on top. This is unsurprising. But if their last card or one of the cards in hand is Beanstalk, then I can actually daze the Edict. Doesn't look like that's what's happening, though. So it looks like my opponent might stabilize at 2. I'm going to attack first. I don't think there's anything that could stop this. This is like one thing that comes up a lot with this deck is like, okay. Is that, like you want to attack with your Psychic Frog or your Fanatic, whatever, but you have a Thoughtseize. It's like anything your opponent could do that's relevant, they could just respond to Thoughtseize with. So it's like you should usually just attack first and then Thoughtseize in the second main phase. And I am behind enough that I'm actually not going to Thoughtseize my opponent here because I might need to Thoughtseize myself to get this Atraxa into the graveyard. My Entombs are dead. They don't do anything. My opponent's last card could have just been a land to play around discard. And I'm feeling behind now, so it's like I need to do things that get me further ahead. My opponent is representing a hard cast Force of Will, which means that. No! Oh no! This troll is so close to being cast, but not castable. That wasteland got me good. So yeah, I'm just gonna play this land out and pass. I guess I don't really care about that. It will start pressuring my life total though, so it's like in a couple turns I won't be able to reanimate a track set anymore. I'm gonna save the troll. It's bad specifically if I draw. Actually, I guess okay. I'm gonna look at how many lands I've gone through because the deck does not play that many lands. So 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So there's 7 more lands in the deck, and there's 3 more trolls. So I think I'm just supposed to hope to draw one of the 7 lands and not one of the 3 trolls. Oh, that's gonna kill me very quickly. Okay. That troll's not very good either. Let's see. Okay. Well, I did draw one of the lands. Never where you really want to be with the blue-black deck. Am I just dead to them jumping frog? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I am in fact dead. All right. I trust my opponent to see it. Yeah, I wasn't getting there anytime soon. All right, to the sideboard. So it's interesting. So I think I definitely want these two. I do appreciate the pivot. I think that Borrower lines up pretty well versus the Murktide. The other question is if I want like Murderous Cut and or Fatal Push. They line up well versus Psychic Frog, you know, and Tamiyo, I guess. That's about it. Trim 1 days. I usually trim like 1 to 2 Animate Deads, and then against a deck like this, like I think this is going to be a common plan where like you trim 2 Entombs and you trim 1 Fatty. You bring in some fair stuff, and then you call it a day. All right, I won the die roll. I will play first. This hand does just send it with Force of Will backup, so I'm going to keep. The question is, do I want to play into Wasteland on turn 1? Probably will. Like, what's really the harm? I guess. Actually, I kind of want to incentivize the turn 1 Wasteland just because that means I can't get dazed, and I don't want to just play out the Entomb because, like, if my opponent leads on Nile Spellbomb, that might change my decision. Cameo. I'm going to Entomb in response and see what my opponent does. I kind of like responding to the spell because they know a little bit less about like what's going on. Okay, this just happened. What do I want to happen here? Brainstorm plus Fanatic is a combo. But do I want Daze over that? Okay. Opponent says it's enough. Yeah, I kind of agree. If they don't have a way to kill this, yeah. Be tough. On the draw, I just run it back. Maybe I want the Dazes on the draw. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but hear me out. So on the draw, you can't be as proactive. Like your proactive plan is worse on the draw. And so becoming reactive gets a little bit better. This is where my head is at right now. But what would I cut for it? Maybe like an Animate Dead. I think this is fine. I think I'm just gonna run it back. I wanted to quickly highlight the idea behind bringing in Daze on the draw, where it's like your proactive plan is worse, so you want to be more reactive to what your opponent is doing, and like dazing their turn 2 Frog, turn 2 Beanstalk, etc. But I think this is good enough. I have the 4 Force of Wills. It could be Daze on the draw, cut a Force of Will. Try that. This might have just been correct on the play too. Unclear. I should have one of the dazes be a different art so that I know when I draw it. That's actually like a reasonably good way to test when you're testing one or two ofs, is like you have one with a different art style. I'm gonna keep this. It has decent mana. I think what I would like to do on turn 1 is Thoughtseize off an Underground Sea. And then I could cycle Troll and then reanimate it. I could also this turn just cycle the Troll, and then next turn I could Thoughtseize plus reanimate. That might be better because it's like I have... It's better in the sense that I have the knowledge of what my opponent draws on their turn 2. It's worse in the sense that, let's say they have a Beanstalk here. That might be a card I want to interact with before they get to cast it. And this is a spot, actually, this is actually a pretty important thing to come up. This is a spot where this Wasteland is actually really bad for me, because I would love to Thoughtseize on turn 1, and then next turn just Entomb plus reanimate, you know, assuming the coast is clear. But I can't do that now because of this Wasteland. I actually don't know what I want to do here. I think given this, I just want to cycle the Troll and get my mana set up, and then next turn I can Thoughtseize plus Ponder. There's the Psychic Frog. That's annoying. Just because it means they're going to see more cards. It means they're going to see more new cards between the time that I Thoughtseize them and the time that I go for my combo. The Force is not bad. I'm going to... What if I just do Entomb reanimate right now with Force backup? Because, like, the thing is, if my opponent draws Wasteland, if my opponent draws Daze, I think I'm just going to try and send it. Whatever. It would have been really nice if I knew what I was drawing, but I didn't. Enchantment, creature, instant, land, sorcery. A lot of these are going to go to discard. So I want some of these to not go to discard. I want to discard the Metamorphosis Fanatic. So I guess I can discard Wasteland. So there's like, I have to discard 3 cards. So it's like, do I just put a card back, or do I want to? Alright, I'm gonna put the Animate Dead back. Not take it. And then actually, so one thing that was part of this calculus that's actually pretty important, and I'm gonna ask Brian if he wants to do recoup after the games, is that my familiarity with the Bug Beanstalk list influenced my play there, right? Where, because I know that Bug Beans doesn't usually play Fairy Macabre, and their graveyard hate is like the Spell Bombs and the Graph Digger's Cage, I knew that's not something I had to play around, and that influenced my decision. So that might be something that we want to... I don't think most pilots are going to know that, you know. But that might be a thing we want to make a change for Eternal Weekend. Like, we could maybe change that around a bit. Okay, yeah, my opponent's hand was just bad here. It didn't matter too much. Yeah. I'm just going to play out my frog. I could push their frog. But like, what's the point? Yeah, I think knowing the list made me feel more comfortable going for it because I only have to play around Daze and Force of Will. Um, I guess I'll force this. Opponent, that's the opponent's unknown draw set. Okay, yeah. All right, let's jump into the debrief.
I am live on the call with Pokemoki now, and we're just going to debrief the game before we go into the next one. What did you notice from your side?
So I noticed a few things. One is in game one, I think we saw one of the issues that the blue black deck has, where it's just like if you aren't doing something explosive out the gate or your opponent interacts, sometimes you can kind of just stall out and not do much of anything. So my hand at the end was like 6 lands, Daze, Atraxa, Archon. Like when I cast that Brainstorm, and I'm just like, I can't even surveil a bad card away. My hand is still just not doing anything here. So that's one of the weaknesses. And
Right.
then
I mean, also a strength though that game one, because I had double Nile Spellbomb, and you still managed to reanimate or flip a Metamorphosis Fanatic and then reanimate my Baleful Strix and be up a bunch of cards, and to put me in a position where I had to find that Children's Edict to even be alive. And then, like, if you had really anything to follow that up over the next 3 turns, I was basically dead. So that we saw the strength of the grind, even against main deck hate.
Yeah, I do think Fnatic has definitely been an important tool for that end. Obviously, there's some inconsistencies. I did draw a lot of brainstorms that game. I will say, I feel like in that game one, your draw was somewhat anemic too, right? Like there was no Beanstalks or Murktides, where it's like, I think even if you found Murktide rather than Children's Edict, you also just would have been in that game. So you were drawing to a lot of outs there.
Right. Yeah. I think I was favored in that position, but if your 6 lands in hand were force blue card, I couldn't win. And the strength of the keep was the Nile Spellbomb, basically. Like my keep was Nile Spellbomb, Psychic Frogs, or not Psychic Frog, Baleful Strix. Nile Spellbomb, Baleful Strix, Children's Edict, and like 2 lands, where turn off the graveyard, answer the next 2 creatures was the plan. And it worked for a while, and then it didn't work, and then I needed you to flood out to actually pull out.
Sure, that's fair. And then I do think I ran pretty hot in the post-board games just because I'm doing the very common thing of cutting 2 Entombs post-sideboard and one of the big creatures.
Oh, okay.
And I just happened to have the Entomb in my opener both times. And then I just wanted to touch on game 3 real quick because on my end 2 things came up. One was the mana base, where I talked in my debrief about like Wasteland versus not, and I did have a Wasteland in that game 3, and it affected how I played the turn because it's like what I wanted to do was Thoughtseize turn 1 and then Entomb Reanimate turn 2, but I had to Swamp Cycle with Troll. So it's like if you just had interaction there, I wouldn't have known about it and would have had to play into it. And I think that is those things are a big difference between winning and losing, right? Like so much of the game bottlenecks to this point where you are reanimating your Atraxa,
Right.
The other big thing was that I think I don't know if most pilots would have taken that risk. Part of why I chose to take it was because I know that the Bug Beanstalk deck, at least lists right now, are playing the mana graveyard hate, like the permanent based hate. And so when that's not in play, I don't have to worry about like Surgical or Macabre. And so just from a deck building perspective, that might be something we want to think about before Eternal Weekend, where obviously I don't think every Blue Black Reanimator pilot will be tuned in to, what Bug Beanstalk is doing, but it is still very powerful. Like Macabre is still very powerful because it's not sitting in play to know about, and you can't Daze or Force to Will it. So like that might be a card we want access to just from a deck building perspective.
Right. I had the same observation when that was happening, where when you cast the Entomb and I didn't have a cage or a spell bomb in play, and Entomb resolves, you just know that it reanimates fine from that point on. And you having designed this sideboard is a huge advantage over the average rando. And we could either actually play one of those cards, or we could let the average rando play around Fairy Macabre and hope they slow down and just give me like one more turn to dig for the actual cage. There's two ways to approach that reasonably. And I also had the observation where when you just Entomb reanimated me twice in the sideboard games, I thought what you were doing was acknowledging that the Demir tempo sideboard juke is not a better mid-range tempo deck than Bug Beans is, and you just decided to stay a reanimator deck. But hearing that you actually did go to the half juke and just had it and sent it twice, I don't feel so bad about my plan anymore. Like, if you have it, you have it. That's part of playing against combo. But am I supposed to mull to 5 to find a Grafdigger's Cage against someone who has somewhere between 0 and 2 Entombs in their deck? I don't know.
Probably not. No, I agree. That might be that might not also be another like point in favor of playing a fourth piece of hate, though, where it's like you just have it more often, so you don't have to mulligan for it as much, and you have that bar of safety. On my end, I've been testing. I mentioned in my intro, I've been testing a lot with this deck and Beans, and one of the reasons that I might not want to play Reanimator is the Nadu matchup has felt worse and worse as those pilots have tuned the deck, and it still feels really good from the Bug Beanstalk side.
Okay.
And part of the issue with Reanimator versus Nadu is that they have so much graveyard hate that you have to rely on your mid-range plan, and it is not better.
No, it's not.
Which I think that if Beans can get to that point, that is like a very good combination.
Okay, so initial impression, we have this fourth Beanstalk in the sideboard right now. We have the second Island in the sideboard right now. The Dark Betrayal / Days brand new slot that just opened up. Where do you see Fairy Macabre going if that's a card we're gonna adopt?
I personally, I'm closest, just baseline, I'm closest to wanting to get rid of that Days / Betrayal for it. Just because I feel like looking at my sideboard plan, I was cutting Days versus a lot of decks. I was keeping it in basically versus tempo and like spell-based combo, like Doomsday or Storm. And so that's kind of narrow. And as you said, it's like a general thing, but not a specific thing.
Right, and this slot is for this matchup. Like
exactly,
whether it's Days, Dark Betrayal, or Fairy Macabre, it's all for this matchup. And do we want more answers to Psychic Frog, or is the deck already good at that? Or do we just want to make sure we don't get cheesed and make them play our game? And that's what Fairy Macabre would do.
Yeah, I think that the deck is pretty suited to fight Macabre. You just have a glut of removal, and your big creatures line up well. Like Murktide is certainly fallen out of favor recently, but it does line up very well versus Psychic Frog.
Yeah, it's really big.
Yeah, and it flies. So I think that making it so you don't lose the cheese is probably better. And I do think Cage still has a home just because it is quite good versus Nadu and like Cradle Control, as an example. And it's a card you can bring in versus Mystic Forge to stop the Mystic Forge or
right.
So I like that as a slot, and I think that it needs to stay for those matchups.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I've changed Dark Betrayal to Fairy Macabre until we decide otherwise.
I dig it. All right, do you want to hop into another one?
Yeah, let's do another one.
All right, sounds great. All right, we're back in for round 2. This time I am playing without any Wastelands in my build, but I'm not telling Brian that beforehand. I said I would alternate between yes and no, so he won't necessarily know which version I'm on. This hand has a lot of selection. Obviously, it's a little bit slow, but Troll is kind of a nice card to have for when you Manacle into Fanatic, and just finding a Reanimate can be good for it. So I think I'm just gonna lead off with a Troll cycle, Swamp Cycle. There's the bomb. I'm still going to Swamp Cycle. I think that looking for a troll to reanimate is pretty reasonable against these sorts of decks. I am going to do this rather than play the fetch land. Maybe that's bad. So I'm going to do 2 lands and look to Swamp Cycle with Troll in the upkeep. And I am just going to target this with Reanimate. If it trades 1-for-1 with Spell Bomb, that's quite powerful. Getting this down early when my opponent can't necessarily Murderous Cut this card is good. I could also just draw the land next turn and look to Entomb plus Reanimate, or Entomb plus Animate Dead. That does play into a lot of things, though, and I have to let that resolve. Yeah, I think I'm going to Swamp Cycle in the upkeep. Get another C. Fatal Push, not the best draw. Okay, and I think I want to cast Entomb right now. I think I do, just because it gives them less time to find, like, Force of Will. Uh-oh. Well, there's the Force of Will. Alright, so that's going to happen. I do think it's correct for Brian to Force of Will the Entombs, just because when the big creature is sitting in the graveyard, it just puts so much pressure on the game. Do I want to brainstorm in response to this Thoughtseize? I don't think so. It would be a pretty bad brainstorm. If my opponent takes it, I do still have an Animate Dead for the Troll, potentially. My opponent does take brainstorm, which is not surprising. I am going to Animate Dead this Troll, and then see what happens before I make my decision. If all goes well, that's good. And then now I want to... Okay, so this is a card we've talked about playing in the main deck. I actually think it's pretty good in this metagame. It's a card where it's like, this would have been the third Daze, and as you can see, Daze is a card where it's like, we talked about it before the game, where it's like, okay, what matchups do you want 3 Daze for? And blue-black was one of the main ones. Like, I don't need 3 versus like any of the Ancient Tomb decks, because they're all on Vexing Bubble. You know, like, a lot of the fair decks is not great versus, so showing its stuff here, which is quite powerful. And Daze would not have been good here. I think that when Reanimate only costs 1 mana, which it does, it can be easy for the blue-black player to play around Daze if they want to. And I think most of them will. Even if they don't want to, it's just going to happen quite naturally a lot of the time. So yeah, this is definitely a point in favor of the main deck Consign. I think it's just quite good right now. And it's also, you know, even if it's not Animate Dead, it's like, if I get back an Atraxa, you can Consign the trigger, you know, and then they don't draw the 4 cards. And if you... So I think I'm going to keep this. And then next turn, what I will do is I will Surveil the Archon into the graveyard and look to ponder for a reanimation spell. Interesting that Brian went for the Hedge Maze rather than the Mystic Sanctuary to get back a Force of Will. What does that mean? It means maybe they have a Force of Will already, or they don't have another blue card. They did not do anything here, so that's not good. I probably should have played the Brazen Borrower. I think that bouncing Murktide is just not part of the game plan right now, because it draws them cards anyway. I mean, it's hard to argue with 2 Psychic Frog, even though it's not a reanimation spell. So this is what we're going to do. I don't have a lot of confidence for this, just because, you know, my opponent has 4 cards in hand, did not do anything. I feel like this is so likely to just die. It did die. But I do think it's better than your average thing. And like I said, Force of Will is just a card that they could have here. I'm actually not going to play into the hardcast Force of Will. I'm gonna look to Brazen in the end step. If this was any permanent and it could bounce my Animate Dead, that'd be so good. But it's not. So I actually think I'm gonna wait another turn. I'm not really under pressure, and my thought process is, all right, let's say I play Brazen in their end step, they Force of Will it, and tap, I play my Frog. It's not really protected. All right, things are getting bad. I will hardcast a Force on this Thoughtseize, though I do think it's just gonna get Force of Willed itself. Oh, interesting. Okay, my opponent did not use their Force of Will there. If they have one, they might not have one. That was a reasonable draw. Well, they Force of Will here. I think you have to when it's drawing 2 cards. And I think that even if I get the Archon, like let's say I had Reanimate in hand, I think that with 4 cards in hand, my opponent probably could find a way to play through it, you know? Like if they just have a Murderous Cut or whatever. If we get to a game 3, I'll look at how the fetching patterns have been and decide if I want to play Magus of the Moon. But this game is looking reasonably over. It's just kind of a matter of time until my opponent finds a Murktide Regent and kills me with it. I again don't really want to cast my Ponder into this hardcast Force of Will that they're representing, just because this is kind of my best bet to find. All right, this looks like a Murktide, which I said I didn't want to bounce it. I might have to bounce it. So I'm just gonna die to the 8/8 too quickly. And at least the new one will be smaller. They've already drawn 3 cards, so I do not have to worry about Cameo flipping here. A nice little consolation prize, I guess. And I will Petty Theft the Murktide. I guess if they have Force of Will in hand and this would be their only blue card, this is bad, but like I don't think I can beat that guy. I'm just gonna hope to go for it this turn. Oh, you know what? Maybe if my plan is to find Reanimate and get back Archon, I think this was bad actually. If my goal is to oh no, to find Reanimate and get back Archon, then I really should be leaving the guide in play. Get that out of here. I'm not feeling good about this. I did just give my opponent a Murktide that draws 2 cards on cast, so things are not looking good for me. You never know though. I could draw Brainstorm into Thoughtseize Reanimate, and then this would always work. Are we going 3rd Beanstalk, or is this with a Bloom Command? This is looking like Command, because there's the delay between the floating the mana and choosing the modes, then it resolving. I assume they're gonna mill themselves to clear their Ponder. That's like one of the nice parts about Command, is that it does actually work pretty well with your cantrips, where you just keep the good card, you mill the bad cards. Fills your graveyard with spells for oh, interesting. They milled me. It just means they like what they have on top of their library, I guess. I would have drawn Fanatic too, which is kind of wild. Oh, that also makes sense, whereas if you have the Spell Bomb, then it's probably really smart to mill your opponent since the graveyard's gone anyway. And if you like the cards, yeah. Okay. I'm gonna take 1 draw step and then concede. But yeah, this one was not close. I don't want to Entomb in the upkeep. That'd be probably pretty bad. All right, this would have been a Daze here. This is another trick that I'm trying the same trick of cutting 1 Daze and playing in Consign just for metagame implications. It would have been reasonable against all these Beanstalk triggers, I will say. And Consign can also hit Main Nile Spellbomb, so it's not terrible, but it's mainly for like the 1-rank type cards. Okay. I think I'm gonna do basically the same plan as last time. My Sideboard is a little bit different. I do have the extra Baraglyph in this one. Playing a Plague Engineer here, try and help versus Nadu. Hasn't been working as well as I wanted, but that's okay. That's a story for another day. And then I have a Go for the Throat instead of a Fatal Push. Alright, so yeah, basically the same idea. I'm gonna animate Dead, one of the fatties, 2 Entombs, and then the Consign does hit Spellbomb on cast. It does hit Beanstalk triggers, but I don't think it's... I think it's too narrow, where it's like, if my opponent just sneaks in the Spellbomb around Consign, it's just really... Yeah, basically the only difference... I have 2 Baraglyphs in this list, whereas I had 2 Brazen Borrowers in the other list. I think they both serve about the same purpose. People have moved away from cards like Ghost Vacuum in the sideboard to cards like Fairy Macabre, specifically to help play around things like Brazen Borrower, so this is like a more pokey-mokey tuned list, we'll say. Anyway, this is how I'm going to run it. I'm going to submit. Go for the Throat notably hits Murktide Regent too. Obviously, it's 1 more mana. I would like to play first. This one's no good. I will mulligan it. Oh no, this one's also no good. I have to mulligan this one as well. Alright, keeping. I'm gonna bottom Force of Will and a land. Do I want to keep both fetches though? I think this is fine. One is on 7 cards. Let's hope this Psychic Frog runs away with it. I'm actually not gonna get this Reveal land just yet. It gets a little better later in the game when you know what you want. Not good. Obviously, the mulligan not great there. I do think it probably would not have mattered much. I'm gonna brainstorm here. Kind of trying to see if I can get my opponent to tap out for something. This is tough. Yeah, I'm gonna do it like this. Do it like this. Daze, Fatal Push, Lorien Reveal. Alright. What do I take here? I guess I'll take the Lorien. These are all tough for me to beat. I guess I'll take the Fatal Push and be like, okay, I can draw like a Barrowgoy for something, and that will help. But it means my opponent's unlikely to tap out anytime soon, so I think I'm just gonna have to accept that the Spellbomb will be a 2-for-1. Left the card on top with their Surveil. That makes sense. It's a good card to draw here. Wonder if it was correct to leave up green or black. I guess it doesn't really matter. Like, you have the Underground Sea in hand, so it's probably better to do it this way for sure. And then if you draw something like Beanstalk or whatever, you can just play it. Yeah, it doesn't matter at all. I'm gonna assume the sea is gone and take that out. I'm gonna cast a Ponder. I guess the question is now, do I want this troll? I think the answer is no. I'm just going to Surveil. That's a good one. I'm happy I surveilled. I know my opponent has Daze. Yeah, at this point the Fanatic is a 1-for-1 with the Spellbomb, which is about the best I can hope for. Fanatic is just so good at not being card disadvantage when your opponent has Graveyard Hate, which is very important in post-sideboard games, I have felt. Beanstalk. Obviously, Murderous Cut would be quite powerful here, but I do have Reanimate to hopefully bring it back. Spellbomb's pretty good too. I will say. Force of Will is not bad. Do I want to brainstorm right now? I don't know what I could draw. I'm actually not. I'm just really behind. I'm gonna assume the Lorien's gone too because they didn't play a land drop. They would have cycled first. I'm so behind to this Daze is the issue. Or it's like if I brainstorm into like a Psychic Frog, then Daze is quite bad. Or Daze is quite bad for me. But do I want like a land drop to shuffle away this Force of Will? I don't think so. I think I just have to hold it. And maybe we just like hope Fnatic goes to distance. We force a removal spell on the Fnatic. And hope that it deals 14 points of damage. You know, probably not ideal, probably not good. But it might be what we have to do. We'll Force a Will this. And it still draws their card. I could try to reanimate Murktide, put a 3/3 in play that costs me 7 life. Is that good? Is that good, chat? I don't know, but it would. The bright side of that is it would cost the opponent their graveyard. Like they would have to lose their graveyard, which has value. Okay, so they're dismembering. So this is actually a very tough decision, right? Where it's like I could Swamp Cycle and then reanimate Fnatic. But then the Spellbomb gets both things. I could just reanimate Fnatic. I think I just want to hit the Murktide Regent. Oh no, that's so good. Okay, so the Macabre that we brought in is paying dividends. All right, I will Swamp Cycle at this point just to get my second Surveil land. That is another thing that I quite like about the builds without Wasteland is that you have room for the second Surveil land, which for me has come up quite a lot. Especially in these Sideboard games where things slow down, just having a little bit more selection is quite good. I don't have much hope for this game, but let's see how things play out. But it has Beanstalk, 4 cards in hand to my none, active Spellbomb. You know, that Macabre, that was very good. I am happy on this end, right? This is very much a win-win scenario for me, right? Where it's like, we're playtesting 2 of the decks I'm considering for Eternal Weekend, and just like seeing us trying a new card and it works out well is good. It makes me hopeful. Oh no, alright. I don't think this is probably not winnable at this point. I'll ponder. I will ponder. Alright. If it's winnable, it's by killing. That was a very good ponder. Killing this and playing Fnatic and hoping the 4/4 lifelink gets there. We will see. And now my opponent can cycle Spellbomb mostly with impunity, just because I would need Brazen Borrower plus a reanimation spell to do anything here. And I have no cards in hand. Opponent has 5 mana untapped. See, they did shuffle off the Ponder. Okay, so they're just fetching back the Ponder. Maybe they're planning to cantrip into it. Okay, that makes sense. That seems reasonable to me. I will say, my opponent has 6 lands to my 4, so it's just like that has helped a bit. I think that's something that you can try to shoot for against the slightly go bigger fair decks. You know, it's just to get some ritual card advantage through your land drop differential. Opponent is also 14 cards further into their deck than I am, which gives you somewhat of an indication about how the matchup is going. Obviously, some of those are fetch lands, you know, some of those are just cycles off Beanstalk that weren't 2-for-1s. But still, it's a reasonable indication of how the game is going. I appear to be dead. The Beanstalk engine pulling ahead. I will play it out just like a couple more turns. Nothing too crazy. I don't think I have any outs, just to be clear, but it doesn't really hurt too much. Oh, alright. I'm gonna let Brian draw the 5 cards, and then I'll concede. Alright, yeah. I won't even let him go to discard. He doesn't have to even discard any of the cards. Alright, let's try to hop in for another quick debrief.
Okay, yeah, that one went a lot better for my side.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. On my end, two quick thoughts. I think game one kind of went the same way game one did in our last match, where you were able to interact with what I was doing, and then just kind of the inherent issue with the deck that its late game is pretty poor and uh, can just draw a lot of not useful things came into play. And then game two obviously was a mulligan to 5, but for what it's worth, I don't really think it had too much of an effect. Just the first two no landers, but the cards I bottomed were like a Force of Will and an extra land, and like the difference was basically I didn't need the land, so the difference was like a brainstorm, that I pitched to Force of Will. I don't think that's changing the outcome there, so that was really convincing. And then
Right, and mulligans are
very
part of the
happy.
game, and
Exactly, yeah,
Reanimator
yes,
is a combo deck that needs ABs to come together for synergy, and I'm just a deck with card quality, so Reanimator is going to mulligan more than Bug Beans over a larger
yes,
set of games.
completely agree. And then I was happy that the fanatic or not fanatic, the
The
macabre
Macabre.
worked out well. Yeah, doing exactly what we need it for, and we can kind of see how the mid range. You were never in uh, real threat of losing the mid range game, so just having stuff for the graveyard feels powerful.
Right. Yeah, like game one, there was, I think, one turn where my shields were down and you were pondering with an Archon in the graveyard. But
Mm-hmm.
even if that Archon came in, I was holding Murderous Cut and I had a card I wouldn't miss to discard. Like it would have been
Mm-hmm.
a pretty fancy Lightning Helix for the most part.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
but the removal's not white in this deck, so like cutting an Archon, going down 2 cards, and then cut it, you go down another card, you're down 3 life, and then it gets reanimated again is a steady problem that like Swords of Plowshares decks don't have. But
mm-hmm.
once that ponder missed on that clutch turn, I just wasn't worried about anything anymore. And then game two,
Yeah,
I don't think I was ever worried about anything you did in game two at any
yeah.
point.
That seems correct. Yeah, that sounds good. It's always good when the plan kind of works how you write it up. I don't have too much more to unpack there. Do you want to hop into one more game, or do you have anything else?
No, that I was just really happy that the macabre came up so heavy. Like you
Yes.
were being clever around my Nile spell bomb by reanimating out of my graveyard, and I just countered it and took your graveyard anyway with the macabre. That was just kind of the perfect toy.
Yeah, I do think that is like a reasonable part of like it does subtly help the issue of not having Swords of Plowshares, right? Where it's like it gets rid of 2 creatures out of a graveyard, which means it's fizzling a reanimation spell and you have less things to reanimate later. So it's good there too.
Yep. Yeah,
All right,
absolutely.
sounds great.
Cool. Let's play another one.
All right. Here for round 3 of this testing session. I'm on the Wasteland build again. This hand seems reasonable. Maybe like a little bit land heavy, but Brainstorm can fix that. And Entomb is one of the better cards, so I'm going to keep. That's like decent, not bad. I have to decide if I want to cycle with this Troll on turn 1 or Surveil or Brainstorm. Probably not Brainstorm. Do I want to daze this? I don't hate it. I feel like so this could be bait, right? But also when you're on the draw, I think daze falls off a little bit. I am going to do this, and then I'm just gonna cycle with the troll rather than cast Entomb here because my opponent could have daze as well. Get another C. All right, so opponent did have the land to play. I think that's good sequencing where it's just like you want to play the same way with your land light hands as your land heavy hands, just so that your opponent doesn't know when they can daze ponders with impunity. And I'm pretty happy to play the Wasteland Go game here. So I'm just going to let this happen. And yeah, I'll do it again. I'll float a blue this time, but I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm a little worried about the one Bowmasters just because like nothing has happened. But it could just be like removal spells. I don't really want to use this reanimate on Troll of Cosm Doom. Is somewhat of my issue here. All right. I'm gonna play around Bowmasters a bit and brainstorm here. If my opponent dazes, I'm not too upset. I probably should have gotten the Underground Sea. I was just not thinking. It was almost certainly a mistake, I believe. So we'll put back Atraxa, and then I'm going to put back Reanimate, just to protect that from a Thoughtseize type effect. Opponent hasn't done anything. I guess I don't have like infinite time where it's like my opponent will eventually figure this out. I am going to Entomb in the end step and hope to fight a fight. Now, do I care about the Beanstalk, or do I care about being most likely to resolve Atraxa? Where it's like, this is bad if my opponent has like double force, double blue card. I do think I am gonna force this Beanstalk just because if my opponent, let's say my opponent forces the Reanimate, I'm still like in good shape, right? Like my deck has a lot of other reanimation effects to hit, and so I feel like I'm in a decent spot. I'm going to reanimate the Atraxa. Okay, that just happened. Feels like opponent must be on like Murderous Cut, which this daze will line up well against. Though they could also have a daze of their own. Oh no! All right. Well, I will daze this still, and hope that that works. Obviously, I think it's likely to work just because they would have forced the. So I think I take Fanatic and Reanimate and go Misty Rainforest. That seems fine. And then I'm just going to Swamp Cycle, get a C, play that as my land for turn. And I'm just going to put a Troll into play. I think that two things will be tough for them to deal with. Obviously, this plays into daze, but like, you know, I only have 2 mana, so I'm doing this. Oh, I'm at 4 also. Gotta be a little careful about that. I can't do that again, we'll say. Keep track of your life total, kids. I know when you feel like you're winning the game, that's something you can overlook. Luckily, there's no like, you know, burn or lightning bolt and this sort of thing, but there is Bowmaster for a little bit of reach. There is Witherbloom Command, but obviously Command is too slow here because Rexa has lifelink. This does happen, fortunately. Yeah, that's pretty good. All right. Opponent is surprisingly stable. I'm going to attack for 6. And I don't think I can Thoughtseize here. I think that that is one I just have to kind of hold on to. Otherwise, I just lose to Witherbloom Command. I will still have a decent board, you know. I'm not too far out of losing, or too far behind in that regard. Uh-oh. Yeah. This might get there. Oh no, and it mills my Phoenix. Oh, that was such a good play. That was a really good play from the opponent. Yeah. Because they knew about one of the Fanatics because of the Atraxa trigger. And so now I'm drawing live, or not live, but dead. I'm gonna start by attacking, and then I'm going to. Oh, I should have pondered main phase 1. Yeah, that was foolish. I don't think these cards really do anything. I will shuffle. I'm gonna play this out first, and then. I'm likely gonna hit the green source. I will shuffle. Then hit this so I can't get Witherbloom commanded again. At least not yet. They are cycling the spell bomb, which makes sense. So yeah, this is a matter of, can they find a second command and a green source, or a way to deal with troll, or will I get there? Fingers crossed I get there. I guess Murktide does win the race too. This Brazen Bar was a pretty good draw, all things considered. I'm gonna hope they don't have forest plus blue card as one of the last stuff. If they do, I can't beat it. Alright, and then I will hit this. Hope it's good enough. This has been a sick game. This is really close. I'm not sure if the reanimating the troll was correct, but I do think it was. It's close though. Obviously 4 is not a high life total. Murktide's no good. So it would need to be another Murderous Cut or Shield's Edict. Ooh, alright. Very close one. I think I got pretty lucky to draw that Brazen Borrower there. A lot of back and forth. Alright. I'm gonna play the same way I have been. Actually, might not be true. I've talked about wanting to play a Harbinger. Which I will. I'm gonna lead the second Borrower in the sideboard. It's only good against like specifically Murktide. And when the Murktide is drawing my opponent cards, that is, it becomes less good suddenly, unsurprisingly. Yeah, I think this is just how I'm gonna run it. Hope to catch my opponent with their pants down a bit and play out this Harbinger. I think one thing about the Wasteland build is that your opponent is already somewhat incentivized to fetch for the basics because they know you have the Wastelands. Harbinger worse. Just like another thing that I'm thinking about. All right, opponent is on 6. I'm also on 6, but I'm gonna go to 5 pretty quickly. Yeah, just a bunch of no landers. So keep. I'm gonna bottom this. Bowmaster is so good against the deck. Troll is quite good as a card to get back with Fnatic. I'm actually just going to hit the land here and hope that I draw lands. Which I know my deck's not been great at doing, but that's okay. Ah, man, this would be very good if it was a regular land, I feel. It might still be good as Wasteland, though. My opponent's on 6 cards. They might be a bit mana light. I think Hedge Maze, it feels like, is getting fetched here. So Wasteland's good versus that card, obviously. Yeah, I don't know. Colored sources are good. They do things. And I kind of want to have 3 mana when I Miracle the Fnatic, just because that plays around days. That might not be good, but I feel like it's what I'm doing. Question mark, question mark. Opponent did fetch a basic island, which does not help against Magus of the Moon or Flood Moon. You know what I mean. You know what I mean. So now I have a tough decision, right? Do I Wasteland them or do I hit my game plan? I think with the second one, I'm just going to try and choose a win here. Again, I'm on 5 cards. My opponent's 6. There's a Beanstalk in play, so I'm just gonna hope that Wasteland is good. Opponent did mill a Tameo with their Surveil. That's also like part of the calculus, right? Shit. So I don't think I can Wasteland them anymore, just because drawing 2 cards a turn, that's like a pretty good way to find lands, right? I'm gonna let them go to combat, and then I will try to deal with the Psychic Frog. Maybe I should have played this main phase to play around. Like, if my opponent has Brainstorm now, they would have gotten a chance to use it. Whereas before, it would have been trapped in hand. Yeah, that was bad. Well, okay, so the card it plays around is Witherbloom Command. That's the main thing it plays around to wait. So So it's like a question of, do you want to play around with a Bloom Command, or do you want to play around Brainstorm? Or do you want to play around a draw step? This might just be a Veil of Summer here. Yeah, that's not too surprising. I am going to ping myself. And then my opponent still has to decide if they're going to let the frog get blocked. Or they might not have to decide anything if they have their own Bowmaster. Oh, it looks like they just have Murderous Cut, which will draw a card. Which lets me ping myself again. And now I have a 2-power Orc Army, which will force my opponent to discard a card if they don't want to jump the frog. Yeah, I will force them to discard a card. This is sort of like a Wrench Mind, right? Where it's like your opponent has to discard a card and they don't draw a card. So both those things are ideal. I'm going to take the time now to brainstorm. And I don't think I want Force of Will. I think what I want to do is put back Force plus Fanatic, then play land and reanimate Troll. And then if that gets countered by like Macabre or Force of Will, then the Fanatic is good. Yeah, I think I'm going to do that. Just a quick note, you don't want to try and reanimate your opponent's things when Psychic Frog is in play. They can just exile that card from their graveyard. Alright, it's in. It's in. And I'm not going to Wasteland here. I don't think it's a good use of my mana. If an opponent wants to start hitting with Frog, they have to jump it, which makes their Delve spells a good deal worse. Right, second Beanstalk. Yeah, so the fact that Frog protects your own graveyard is a big part of why it is so good in. And I do think I want to still draw the Fanatic just as a way to help race, hopefully. Yeah, because opponent is trying to race here, and so having the lifelinker is pretty good. And I guess I'm actually going to leave up the Wasteland, right? Because I'm not going to reanimate anything this turn. And I can decide if I want to Wasteland or play out the Troll. They did not draw a land last turn. I actually think I'm going to hit their mana here. Yeah, so they can deal 7 this turn. I guess if they draw a Murktide, if they have a Murktide, they do have lethal. And I know there's a Force of Will on top, so I can decide if I want to draw that and use it as a way to deal with whatever and then win with my stuff. Or I can decide if I want to... Okay, so again, I think I just need the life here. I'm going to trade this for a card in hand, one less card that they're drawing. I gain 4 life. They can't kill me next turn. Yeah, so I think here I'm just going to draw the Force. And I think it's pretty foolish to reanimate a Fanatic, so I'm not going to. I'm actually just going to Swamp Cycle here and Surveil. Is that a good card? Or is it a card I want in my graveyard? It's probably a good card. I think it's going to come down to this turn, whether or not my opponent can kill my Troll through Force of Will. I think that if they can, I might just be dead in 2 hits. We'll see. Because I'll go to 8. They might not have enough cards. It depends. Okay, I think I'm just going to force this. It's bad if they have Force of Will. Okay. But Oh, that was Sideboard game. Yeah, it was. Okay. All right. So we'll do a quick debrief. All right. Hello.
Yeah, Wasteland was the story of that
Yeah.
entire match. Both games, if you don't Wasteland me, I win. And I think in game one, if I don't Wasteland you on that last turn, I'm also ahead because I drew the Shieldred's Edict. I mean, obviously, maybe you have Counterspell, but I drew the Shieldred's Edict on the last turn where I could, on the turn cycle where I wasted you down to 2 lands myself, then you wasted me down to 1 land myself.
Uh-huh.
And I just put myself to no outs by thinking I could waste you. And then you flipped it back and wasted me. And
Yeah.
that was crazy.
Yeah, that game I was talking, that was a super close game, which is rare after an Atraxa triggers,
Right.
which I think speaks to the grind power of the bug deck, where it's like, I know you've been saying on the podcast a bit, decks that can come back from, we'll say, like a 3-for-1 against um, Reanimator have a good shot at beating it,
Yep.
just because they can pull back in, which is what we saw. I think, the Borrower is a one of main deck that I got very, very lucky to draw in that situation. So I don't think it was like, good or bad. It just seemed very, very close. And like you said, the decisions mattered, and Wasteland came in big there for sure.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, that in the second game as well, where you're able to take me off colors multiple times, that
mhm.
that really collapsed my ability to play. And this is consistent with what I've been saying about the construction of Reanimator with Wasteland in it versus not. I think it is a massive edge in the mirror to have real lands instead of Wasteland, but I think
Mhm.
it is worse almost everywhere else.
Mm. Yeah, it's tough because it's like, without Wasteland, you get to enact your game plan so much more confidently. But as you say, there's times where it can come into play big for sure. Um,
And a deck like this one, like Bug Beans or Esper Stoneblade or even Esper Tempo, now that people are splashing Swords to Plowshares into the Nethergoyf shells, a Wasteland taking someone off a color, like your plan isn't the one you need to enact, really. Like, and this is something we've been chatting about off off camera as well, where that Sam Black article where he described game one as a draft deck and games two and three as a sealed deck, where you
mhm.
need to execute on synergy in game one, and then you just need to have more and better cards in game two and three.
Yeah.
And if you can wasteland me off a color so I don't have more and better cards because I can't cast my better cards, that's really important in the sideboard games.
Mm, yeah, that's true. Maybe from my end, I've been undervaluing the power of Wasteland just in general versus the metagame. I could see that.
I was trying in this last round. I brought in the fourth beanstalk. I wasn't doing that in our first two sets.
Hmm.
Have you mapped this out with the new changes
I
that we made this
have.
morning?
It's I have because I think previously to the changes, I was cutting a beanstalk, and I wasn't bringing in a Witherbloom command. So I think after that, I'm just cutting the Witherbloom command instead, just because I think now that Tamiyo is just not a part of the lists anymore, it really only hits Animate Dead, and I guess a Bowmaster after Sideboard. But it's like this one Bowmaster, and some lists play two. That's about it. Some lists play zero.
It can also
So
threaten lethal when your opponent's at two and you just milled over
it can,
two.
yes, yes. I got a little nervous.
Yeah,
After the
that was
first
a
one.
close one.
That was, yeah.
Yeah, I was so what I was bringing in a 7 card package with Beanstalk as the 8th card.
Hmm.
I was doing Veil, Island, Bowmaster, Carpet, Dismember, Macabre Cage, and
Okay,
I was side grading Island into Wasteland and just making that change because I don't think wasting you is generally my plan.
I agree.
And I was cutting all the Force of Wills, Consign to Memory, and both Witherbloom commands.
Hmm.
When I
This all
wasn't
makes sense.
when I
Oh,
wasn't
sorry.
bringing in the that was 8 cards I just said. When I wasn't bringing in the fourth beanstalk, I kind of was between leaving in one command or one force. But then when we added Macabre, I don't want even one force anymore.
Sure. Yeah, let me see. So I think one big thing that I am doing differently is I'm leaving in 3 Force of Wills for the matchup.
Okay,
Um, I think there are just bottlenecks that like we saw in like we saw in a lot of the game ones where it's like there's a bottleneck that if you get out of it, the game just collapses from the blue black side. Like there's
right.
not like, oh no, I 2 for 1 to myself, but your blue black opponent just has so many bad draws by turn 5, turn 6, turn 7 that just don't do anything. Um, Sometimes those are even like fatal push and go for the throat that like don't have a target yet, but you still need it in your deck. So especially with beanstalks in the deck, I've been a big fan of keeping in 3-ish Force of Will still.
Okay, so what's
Um,
your map? Because that's 3 cards that you are cutting that I'm not. That's a big
yeah.
change.
So let me see here. So basically, really quick. So we went down to 2 days, and then 1 consign, and then we added a macabre. Like we brought a consign in and added a macabre to the sideboard. So I guess I'm bringing in Bowmaster, Carpet, Veil, Cage, Macabre. These all make sense. And then I'm cutting 2 commands, 1 force, and 2 wastelands. And I'm not bringing in the island, which maybe is folly, but I feel like I just don't want to flood too hard. And the island isn't like the island is not the thing that I'm worried about getting wastelanded, right? It's like if I'm trying to keep all my how do I put this? If I am worried about losing my green or black mana to wasteland, because those are the important ones, right? The
Right.
island doesn't really help with that. So island is more for like blood moon decks and back to basics decks in my eyes, or maybe like lands where it's just like you just want as many mana sources as you can play against a deck like lands.
Okay, so you're cutting 2 command, 1 force, and you said 2 wasteland.
Yeah,
All right, so that's 6 cards, and you weren't
that's 5
bringing in the
cards.
island or the dismember. Is the
That's 5
difference?
cards.
What was that?
Oh yes, one difference we
Oh,
have in
that's
our
five
list
cards.
is that I don't have the Strix in my list, and I have Dismember in that slot, and it's
Oh,
not in
okay,
my.
gotcha.
Um, so I guess that frees up one more thing. At that point, it's like personal preference. I do think both cards are good. You don't necessarily need one. You could cut like another Force of Will, play 2 Force, or
Okay,
uh,
and
really
so
small things.
if that's what you're doing with the wastelands, is cutting the third wasteland for island, then check a box because like obviously if they're going to waste you off a color, island doesn't help as you said, but you can ponder and brainstorm your way back into colored mana where wasteland doesn't help. And what are we doing with 1 wasteland? We're just
True.
hoping to cheese, or
It might be
is
right.
there
Yeah.
a real reason for that?
Um. I think it's just I drew it once and it won me a game. Like this is not scientific at all. I think it's just like sometimes it won me a game, or sometimes it stopped my opponent from double spelling as easily. Um, where I'm not sure how much the extra island would have helped there. I'm sure there's also maybe been games where it's like you draw that one wasteland and you drew wasteland plus underground sea, and then your sea got hit, and then you're in trouble. So that might just be better. It's not something I thought about like super deeply.
Okay. Yeah, I'm hyper aggro just in basically all decks at all times with cutting force of will if I can. That's
Hmm.
just something I want to do because I don't like spending 2 cards on 1 card. But
I agree.
obviously, up the beanstalk changes the math on force of will, and what you were saying about the bottleneck makes sense. Uh, like you are you completely off force versus Demir tempo without reanimator, or do you still leave like 1 or 2 in?
I leave in 2 against Demir Tempo. Like I basically never cut more than 2 forces in my deck, where it's like I probably have 3 to 4 beanstalks in the list.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
All right,
Because
yeah,
like you do need things to trigger your beanstalks. Otherwise, it's just not a good card.
right. And without any forces in the deck, it becomes 2 Murderous Cut, 3 Murktide, 2 Lorien
Yeah,
Revealed that can trigger the
yeah.
Beanstalk. That makes some sense to leave a couple in.
hmm And it gets better too, where it's like a lot of times the tempo players or the scam players are leaving in their forces, and like when an opponent leaves in force of wills, yours become better because they're 2 for 2s less or more often. So that also plays into my calculus. I think in our games, I was from the scam side, I was leaving in 3 to 4 force of wills. Um, Partially because I don't have enough things to bring in, but also partially just because, again, I want to push through the bottleneck and get my thing into play.
Okay, yeah, I'll experiment with leaving in more forces than I was. I had one most of the games. I think I'm more likely to leave in 1 or 2 than 2 or 3.
Yeah, that's fine.
And it could just like my personal preference and how I want games to play out.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, there's a lot of personal preference with with this bug deck for sure. I definitely, when people ask me about it, I try to say like, as long as you have a reason, that's way more important for most things. Some things I'm like, okay, you know, you need to play Murderous Cut in the deck, or something like that. Or
right.
like, I'm like strongly like, okay, 4 frogs is too many. It doesn't really do what the deck needs a lot of the time. It's like a card you play after you've locked up the game, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like some things where it's like I have strong reasons, I'll express them, but for a lot of things, it is just personal preference and how you view the meta and flexibility. So I think the number of forces you're leaving in is also in that bucket for me.
Okay. Yeah. And I would say the 1 Strix, the 1 Bowmaster, the 1 Thoughtseize, the 1 Consign are all comfortable flex slots that could be played
Yeah,
with. I like all those slots personally, but they could be played
yeah,
with. Uh,
hmm
2 feels like the right number of Tameo.
yeah. I agree. It falls off hard because just like it's legendary.
Right.
Uh, quick thing: the consign looked much better than a days would have in all of our game ones. So I liked that change quite a lot.
Yes, I liked the Consign most of the time that it showed up. There was one game, the one where I wasted you twice, and I had a Consign in my hand, and I was like, if this was Stifle, uh, the game would be
Yeah,
over. However, Stifle doesn't solve the Eldrazi deck, which is
right.
why we're maining a Consign in the first place. So I think Consign is right, but I did miss Stifle for like 1 second.
Yeah, it's also much worse for like Vexing Bobble and the One Ring.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. This
Yeah,
is the correct one. I just wanted to show
no, I
a
completely
rare
understand.
moment of love for Stifle, a card that I generally think
Uh-huh.
sucks ass.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. All right, I think that's about everything. We had this was a lot of good conversation both on gameplay and deck construction. I'm really happy we did these debriefs.
Yeah, I think this very macabre change is huge, and I'm basically going to lock that, and then just
Yeah.
playing with the plans and figuring out how often I'm actually bringing in Beanstalk. Like, does the 4th one even belong in the board, or is 3 just a good number for the deck? And I mean, that's like a long term mapping assignment. We're not going to figure that out here on this call, but uh, yeah, Consign felt great. Macabre felt right. And the games were
hmm
close and came down to decisions most of the time, which is how I want to play Magic.
Yeah. The play patterns are immaculate. I cannot disagree with that, and I do think it's pretty well positioned right now. So um, I thought we got a lot of this. I'm really happy we did this.
Cool. Yeah, there's a good chance that I have just locked Bug Beans. I was like 70% on Bug Beans before this session. Now I'm like
Mhm.
95%.
Yeah, this
And
made it
yeah.
better for me too. Like it felt like it had the tools to deal with even like the new powered up Fnatic version of this build.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Good stuff, inspiring stuff. I'm excited to potentially play the exact same 2 decks at Eternal Weekend this year that I played last year, which is
a
just its own kind of vibe.
yeah. Yeah, the meta came full circle. At least in Legacy. I don't know what you vintage gamers are doing so much. Although I have enjoyed your vintage content. Um, so yeah, that's cool.
All right, sweet. Well, thanks for the set. Thanks for the chats. This was a huge, important couple hours spent in the week before Eternal Weekend for me. And you know where to find me if you want to message me over the coming week. I'm sure we will.
Yeah, awesome. Same here. All right, I think that about does it for me. Good to call it.
All right, see ya.
Yeah, take care. Bye.